Okay, folks, here is Dr. Bill for you to talk about lovely dinosaurs.
Well, hello and welcome everyone, community of learners, and to those who are learning from home. And welcome to the patrons of the Hewlett-Woodmere Public Library for today's presentation called A World of Dinosaurs. My name is Dr. Bill Thierfelder, and I'll be your host today. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a retired professor of arts and humanities and a docent emeritus from the American Museum of Natural History in New York. I live in Portland, Oregon, where I'm speaking to you from today, and where I'm an artist, writer, and lecturer. I also regularly return to New York, where I continue my work at the museum and enjoy the wonders of the Big Apple. Now, since we can't cover everything about today's topic in one presentation, I'd like to invite you to take a deeper dive on my website, which is makingwings.net, and it is deeper dive number 48. Now, let me show you, let me demonstrate. It's one word, making wings. So if we do that, you should be able to see that now, but just in case, I make sure I reshare. Um, you will come to the home page. If you go to the hamburger menu in the upper left corner and click on that, you will see a drop down. Please feel free to visit any of these, including my upcoming program schedule. But for today's presentation, we're in the first batch of deeper dives. We're number 48. So click on the little downward arrow, not the numbers, but the arrow, and you'll get another drop down. These are programs that I have given or I will be giving in the near future. And, or, as I say, that I've given in the past. Today is World of Dinosaurs, an introduction. And so what you're going to find there are some recommended books. I will be mentioning some of these in my program itself, but if you don't have a paper and pencil handy, you can go to the website and copy down titles there. And then it goes through all of the different topics that we will be talking about. The Permian extinction, what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur? How are dinosaurs classified, and so forth. So there's just a lot of material on this page that I hope that you can visit. And with each one of them, you are going to find that I have links. And so all you have to do is click on the link. You'll be brought to that page. When you're done with that page, click it off and you're back on my page. So it's very much one-stop shopping. So I hope you can take advantage of that. Now, everything that you're going to hear in the program today is can be found, I should say, on my website, stuff that you just saw. But for this presentation, I especially use the following sources to build its structure and its script. The National Geographic, the Smithsonian, the American Museum of Natural History, where I am, the Natural History Museum in London, and the Australian Museum, as well as vetted articles in Wikipedia and on Britannica. And finally, there is a wonderful website called Prehistoric Life, and I have the link for you on my website. Unfortunately, the site was discontinued for a variety of reasons in 2023, but thankfully, you can still access it through Web Archive. And so it's really great, and it has alphabetical listings. And let me see if I can bring it up. Does it come here? Yes, that should bring it up to here. I want to make sure that I'm sharing it. And what it gives you is literally A to Z. And all you have to do, so let's say you wanted T-Rex. Well, that begins Tyrannosaurus with a T. And if you click on the letter T, you are going to be brought to a page that literally has dozens upon dozens of dinosaurs, all beginning with the letter T. Now, if you wanted Tyrannosaurus, obviously TYR, you'd have to go to the bottom of the page. But it is really such a remarkable site. So I definitely used it to help create this particular program, but you might find it interesting for all of you dinosaur lovers out there. Now, one of the things that you did see on the website was the suggested media. Steve Broussait's The Rise and Fall of Dinosaurs is a superb overview of the 160 million year history of dinosaurs on our planet. Dinosaurs and Other Prehistoric Life, published by DK Books, is terrific. And it puts the age of dinosaurs from 220 to 66 million years ago in context. It gives you also what came before and what came after and what's still around today. It's really a beautiful reference book with excellent illustrations. And the story of dinosaurs in 25 discoveries by Donald Prothero not only focuses on a couple dozen of the most well-known dinosaurs, but also examines the lives of the men and the women who made those discoveries of those awe-inspiring beasts. Now, here are three more titles that you might find interesting. Riley Black's The Last Day of Dinosaurs. It reads like a whodunit. As the title suggests, it explores the reasons for the extinction of most dinosaurs and the rise of mammals. It's a good read. The Smithsonian's Dinosaurs and Prehistoric Life is a visual encyclopedia that's really terrific. It covers not only dinosaurs, but other prehistoric life. It's a visual gem. And finally, if you'd like to watch something, well, there are many, many different programs available, including the venerable Walking with Dinosaur documentary. Some of you may remember those from the 1990s. But for a more recent experience, I'd like to recommend The Four-Winged Dinosaur, which is a segment of the long-running PBS science series Nova, and it describes the discovery in 2008 of feathered dinosaurs in China, a discovery that helped scientists unravel many mysteries about both avian and non-avian dinosaurs. And we're going to be talking about this whole topic of feathers a little later in the program. So why don't we dive in, I should say. I'm just looking up here, the great dying. We're going to dive in. Please don't die out on me. Please stay. This is a dive in to understand where dinosaurs fit into the bigger scheme of things. Now, we're going to start with the event that paved the way for their existence. And that's something called the Permian extinction, also known as the Great Dying, which took place about 250 million years ago. Now, here's a chart on your screen that shows Earth's geological history before and after the extinction event 250 million years ago. There have been at least 5 catastrophic extinction events on our planet, all caused by natural events like volcanoes and asteroid impacts. But the Permian extinction was the greatest, killing off nearly 95% of all land and ocean life, including fish, insects, and plants. So that means that after that extinction, everything that evolved after that came from the 5% that managed to survive. Now, though life existed in the Precambrian period, the earliest period of our planet, it truly exploded during the Paleozoic era, which began with the Cambrian period. Abundant life forms moved from the oceans to land, and the first insects plants and reptiles grew in numbers. By the end of the Permian period, about 250 million years ago, Earth was thriving. Forests of giant ferns and early members of the conifer family. Those are the pine trees, right? A multitude of ocean animals, and even primitive relatives of mammals like the Metrodon were found around the globe. And then, as we've said, approximately 250 to 252 million years ago, the Permian Triassic extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying, formed the boundary between the Permian and the Triassic geological periods, and with them, the Paleozoic and Mesozoic eras. Paleozoic on one side, Mesozoic on the other, after the extinction. It is Earth's most severe extinction event, killing off up to 95% of all marine plant, animal, and insect species. The scientific consensus is that the main cause of extinction was a series of massive volcanic eruptions in what is modern-day Siberia, which released huge amounts of sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, resulting in oxygen-starved, sulfurous oceans and very elevated global temperatures. Other contributing factors during this same period made a bad situation worse, including an asteroid impact in what is now modern-day Brazil that destroyed much of the ozone layer that protects Earth from solar radiation. Bottom line, while early reptiles, amphibians, and proto-mammals did exist before the Great Dying, dinosaurs and real mammals did not appear until after the Great Dying, after that extinction in the Triassic period. Thus, the age of dinosaurs starts in the Mesozoic era after the extinction event. By the way, that beautiful forest scene that forms the background on your screen is a Mesozoic forest in Antarctica. Yes, I said Antarctica. That's because Antarctica was once not located where it is today. And that brings us to our next chapter. What did the physical Earth look like at the time of the Great Dying, 250 million years ago? Knowing this helps us better understand the redevelopment of life from the hardy 5% of animals, plants, and marine life that did make it through the extinction period. At the time of the extinction, all the continents as we know them were massed together into one supercontinent that scientists have named Pangaea. Now, as we just saw in the first section, the pollution caused by volcanoes in Siberia and their vast lava flows, known as traps, that covered millions of square miles, wiped out nearly every living thing. This process of destruction and revival was not an overnight thing. Okay? The current consensus is that the extinction took around 200,000 years to take place, with the bulk of the species loss actually towards the end. Still, that's a huge amount of time for volcanoes to be erupting, and the end of species was slow and agonizing. Now, what you see on your screen is how the continents that ride atop gigantic tectonic plates began to pull apart. The Triassic period, when primitive dinosaurs first appear, is indicated by the map in the upper left. You'll note, by the way, that this map uses an alternate spelling of Pangaea, Pangaea. Well, by the Jurassic period, when all life from plants to animals were truly back on track, the Earth had become two massive continents, Gondwana in the south, and Laurasia in the north. And you can see that map in the upper right of your screen. The map in your lower left shows the Earth during the Cretaceous period, when the dinosaurs were absolutely dominant land animals. And the lower right shows the Earth today. And as you can see, the continents have really moved around from Pangaea to Gondwana and Laurasia to what it looked like at the very end of the age of dinosaurs about 66 million years ago, and then what it looks like today. Now, to refresh our memories, tectonic plates move slowly across the Earth's surface, like pieces of luggage on top of a conveyor belt. As the plates move, earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis occur. Heat from the Earth's mantle causes convection currents to rise and sink, creating a force that moves those plates. And these currents move the plates about 1/2 to 4 inches per year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over time really adds up to a lot of mileage. And you can see there on the left of your screen the major plates on the planet. So why is that important? Well, as an example, look at this map of North America as it appeared about 75 million years ago. Breaking Pangaea up into the continents that we know today meant, among other things, that plants and animals that evolved on a single continent like Pangaea got separated from one another and continued to evolve separately into new species on those separate new landmasses. For example, some of the dinosaur species we find in Appalachia are different from those we discover in Laramidia. And plate movement explains why farmers in the middle of Kansas and Iowa find fish fossils and shells in their fields, because that region was once at the bottom of what scientists call the Western Interior Seaway. Bottom line, our world is a dynamic planet, and the end of the age of dinosaurs on a multi-continent planet was different from the beginning of the age of dinosaurs on a single supercontinent we call Pangaea. Well, all of that brings us to our next topic. What exactly is a dinosaur? How is a dinosaur different from the other life forms that lived during the Mesozoic era? Well, it turns out that there was one specific thing that made dinosaurs different from all other land reptiles at the time. And it has to do with the hips. Most reptiles, like crocodiles, have a sprawling stance. Their legs jut out from their bodies, which accounts for their waddling movement. But dinosaurs, they had a hole-shaped space in their hip sockets that allowed them to stand nearly upright. And it's that hole in the hip socket and the ability to move forward at a steady gait rather than waddle that makes a dinosaur a dinosaur. It's a feature that all dinosaurs have without exception. So an extinct crocodilian like Deinosuchus that lived about 75 million years ago didn't have that hip socket. So it waddled along, wreaking havoc wherever it went. But it wasn't a dinosaur. Similarly, the first animals to achieve flight were the pterosaurs. They are often wrongly labeled flying dinosaurs, but they're not. They were indeed reptiles, but they didn't have that hole in the hip socket. With their crazily long fourth finger that held their wings in place, they were a separate branch of evolution that lived at the same time as dinosaurs, but they weren't dinosaurs. Meanwhile, Saurischian dinosaurs like the Allosaurus or the Apatosaurus definitely had that hole. You can see how both the Allosaur and the Apatosaur stand upright on their hind legs. And, like the Saurischians, the Ornithischian dinosaurs like Triceratops on your left and a duck-billed hadrosaur on your right also had that hip feature, which allowed them to move forward at an easy gait. In other words, big or small, dinosaurs didn't waddle, all because of that one simple but remarkable anatomical feature, the hole in the hip socket. Okay, you have, there you see, there the Ornithischian. Okay, you've just heard me use a couple of $20 words, Saurischian and Ornithischian, and those words take us to our next chapter, classifications. As of 2026, there are over 1,350 known ancient non-avian, meaning non-flying, dinosaur species. And they generally fall into 2 or 3 categories. But think about that number, 1,350. Scientists believe that that number represents less than 75% of the total number of dinosaur species that probably did exist. Now, if you think about the millions of insect species and thousands of mammal species that are alive today, well, then only 1,350 dinosaur species is probably only the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Be that as it may, once fossils were beginning to be discovered in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, scientists wanted to categorize them. So, dinosaur classification began in 1842 when the British biologist Sir Richard Owen started placing recently discovered reptile fossils into a distinct group that he named Dinosauria. Then, in 1887 and 1888, Harry Seeley divided those dinosaurs into 2 groups, Saurischia and Ornithischia. Saurischia comprises the flesh-eating, 2-legged theropods and the plant-eating, long-necked sauropods. Ornithischia comprises all the rest. All of these dinosaurs have the hole in the hip socket, but it's their pelvic structure that is different. Saurischians have a pubis bone that faces towards the front of the animal. Ornithischians, oh, where am I? Yeah, there we are. And Ornithischians, there we are over here on the far upper right, they have a pubis that faces backwards, just like many birds do. Though modern birds are not related to this particular branch of the dinosaur family. But it does explain the name, Ornithischian, as in ornithology, as in the study of birds. Now, this illustration from Britannica shows the pelvic distinction very clearly. You can easily see the difference between Saurischian dinosaurs and Ornithischian dinosaurs. So, all dinosaurs had the hole in the hip socket. It was the structure of the pelvis that distinguished the 2 great groups. Now, of course, because science is science, in 2017, the British paleontologists Matthew Barron, David Norman, and Paul Barrett proposed a new way to order these ancient creatures, putting the 2-legged theropods with the Ornithischian dinosaurs and leaving the sauropods and their earlier relatives, the Herrerasaurs, all alone in the Saurischian group. Now, why did they suggest this? Because they found that there were anatomical features that both Ornithischians and theropods shared, including feathers, the probability of warm-bloodedness, and the presence of lighter weight honeycomb bones. Bottom line, new discoveries are being made every day that help us to understand dinosaurs more fully. In science, the catchphrase is always, yeah, stay tuned. Now, just so it doesn't get too crazy, I'm going to stick with the traditional family tree as we look at some what I like to call top 10 dinosaurs. And we're starting with the Saurischian dinosaurs. By the way, in paleontology, we call the family tree a cladogram, which is a branching diagram showing the evolutionary relationships between species. So, one way of seeing the relationship among dinosaurs is by exploring shared characteristics, such as the pelvic structure. So, don't be put off by all the scientific names. Just enjoy these awesome creatures for exactly what they are. Awesome. Now, some of the earliest dinosaurs emerged shortly after that Permian extinction kind of fizzled out. As we've already said, these kinds of changes, they don't happen overnight. We didn't wake up one morning and find Herrerasaurus. No, early dinosaurs evolved from the few hardy reptiles that survived the Great Dying through a process called mutation. Mutations in the DNA of an animal can cause, among other things, physical changes. If that physical change benefits the animal in some way, then the trait will remain. So the shift towards dinosaurs with their hip holes was gradual, but became dominant because it served them well. Now, traditionally, Saurischian dinosaurs are divided into two groups, the theropods and the sauropods. The earliest sauropods were as small as modern cats and as moderately sized as modern rhinos. They tended to walk on two hind legs and were meat eaters like their theropod cousins. But over time, sauropods grew into the lumbering, long-necked quadrupeds that we know and love. Quadrupeds, right? They walk on all fours. And one of the best of those sauropods, and probably the most iconic, is the Apatosaurus. Or, is it the Brontosaurus? Confused? Well, here's the story. Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus were both discovered at a time in the late 1800s known as the Bone Wars or the Great Dinosaur Rush. This was a period when two American paleontologists, O.C. March and his arch rival Edward Drinker Cope, competed to discover and name the most dinosaurs. The rivalry was intense, and they resorted to spying, to theft, and even the destruction of bones. Well, in 1877, Marsh named a long-necked, long-tailed dinosaur found in Colorado Apatosaurus ajax, after the great hero of Greek mythology named Ajax. Apatosaurus, by the way, means deceptive lizard. 2 years later, another large sauropod skeleton was found, and this time in Wyoming. Now, this dinosaur was fairly complete, and it was much larger than the earlier Apatosaurus that Marsh had found. So Marsh named it Brontosaurus excelsus, meaning noble thunder lizard. Well, here's where the complication comes in. Shortly after Marsh's death, the American paleontologist named Elmer Riggs argued in 1903 that the two sets of bones were actually from the same species. The larger set was probably an adult, and the smaller set, the one that had been found earlier, was probably an adolescent. So, because the name Apatosaurus had been used first, its name was kept, and Brontosaurus was officially deleted from the name catalog. And this is true across all science. If you have two different things that turn out to be the same thing, it's the earlier name that will hold precedent and not the later name. Well, so that's why it's Apatosaurus. But by that point, in the early 1900s, the name Brontosaurus had been used so widely and become so popular that it was really the name that stuck. In fact, little trivia here, until its Dinosaur Hall renovations in 1995, no less than my museum, the American Museum of Natural History in New York, called its specimen Brontosaurus. Well, guess what? Happy days. Brontosaurus lives. How? Well, turns out that during the first two decades of this century, the 21st century, a group of paleontologists began working to understand and revise the sauropod cladogram, the sauropod family tree. The study used 81 specimens of Patasaurus from around the world. And the scientists ultimately showed that Brontosaurus was indeed a distinct species from Apatosaurus, with one of the main differences being that Apatosaurus was more massive and more robust, with a thicker and lower set neck than Brontosaurus. So from 2015 onward, the world officially welcomed back the name Brontosaurus. And the whole saga has become a delightful story for fossil lovers of all ages, especially young kids who enjoy displaying their knowledge, dinosaur knowledge, on my tours at the Museum of Natural History. I can't tell you how many kids, have kind of tugged at me and said, well, the Apatosaurus was once called the Brontosaurus. I mean, they kids are into dinos and they love showing off that knowledge. Well, continuing with our dear sauropods, I have to give a shout out to the titanosaurs, a group of absolutely gigantic plant-eating sauropods that absolutely dwarfed Brontosaurus, Apatosaurus, and the other sauropods. Titanosaurs were a diverse group whose remains can be found on all 7 continents. They were the last surviving group of long-necked sauropods at the time of the extinction 66 million years ago. And they were, as I say, still thriving at that time. This group includes some of the largest land animals ever known to have existed, such as Patagotitan majorum, estimated at 121 feet long, with a weight of nearly 80 tons. And you can see on the little thing that I've just put up on your screen there on the left. I mean, that's a modern human. That's Patagotitan. And then look at a Patagotitan in comparison to other sauropods. Much, much, much larger. Well, let's shift over. The theropods. They appear around the same time on the family tree as the sauropods, but from the beginning, they remained bipedal, meaning they walked on 2 legs, and they were meat-eating. And spoiler alert, the theropods are still alive today, and we're going to talk more about that a little later. But for now, let's pay a visit to one of the earliest. And this is a wonderful theropod called Coelophysis. Coelophysis, named in 1887 by Edward Drinker Cope, was small, slender, and ground-dwelling. It was a bipedal carnivore that could grow up to nearly 10 feet. Dating from at least 215 million years ago, it's one of the earliest known dinosaurs. Specimens of this and its similar cousins have been found worldwide in some late Triassic and early Jurassic rock formations. One of the most famous Coelophysis burial grounds is at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, where in the late 1940s, hundreds of skeletons were discovered in a mass grave, probably the result of a flash flood. By the way, if Ghost Ranch is ringing a bell, yes, that is the place where the great artist Georgia O'Keeffe also had a wonderful home and lived. Now, the Ghost Ranch discovery became one of the first to support the idea that dinosaurs traveled in groups, perhaps in full herds. And here's some trivia. Coelophysis is the official New Mexico state fossil. In recent years, fossil finds in various places around the planet suggest strongly that Coelophysis, like most dinosaurs, especially theropod dinosaurs, had primitive feathers, either in their early years or throughout their lives. And to clarify, when we say that Coelophysis had feathers, we mean stage 1, 2, or possibly 3 feathers, like the kind you see on the chart that I just put on your screen. Later theropods, like velociraptors, definitely developed stage 4 feathers, with a solid central shaft and complex, tight veins shooting off the main shaft. Modern birds have stage 5 feathers, with an off-center shaft that creates aerodynamic veins suited for flight. Well, who wasn't scared to death during the original Jurassic Park movie when the velociraptors were terrorizing the kids in the resort hotel kitchen? These 6-foot-long predators lived about 70 million years ago and were indeed carnivorous terrors. That fact, the film got right. But recent finds in Asia have shown that, like other theropods, yep, velociraptors had feathers, voluminous feathers, as the photos on your screen from the Las Vegas Natural History Museum and the Australian Natural History Museum testify. Frankly, I think the feathered versions are much scarier. They're truly the chickens from hell. Meanwhile, velociraptors were cousins to probably the best known of the theropod dinosaurs. So we want to spend a little time with T-Rex and its family. Tyrannosaurus, the tyrant lizard, came from a very large family. The first members of the family emerged during the Jurassic period, but bloomed in the late Cretaceous from about 100 to 66 million years ago. T-Rex itself was the last new member of the clan before the Great Extinction around 66 million years ago. It's called the KT extinction. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Now, here's a list of the expanding family provided by the Australian Museum. Since 2016, at least 9 new cousins to T-Rex have been discovered. These new creatures aren't Tyrannosaurus, but they are genetically related to it. Man, how does this T-Rex story begin? Well, it starts with the first fully mounted T-Rex at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. The AMNH first mounted a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton in October of 1915. The unveiling of T-Rex helped to solidify the image of the dinosaur in the public's mind. And for a time, the Museum of Natural History was the only place in the world where people could see a T-Rex in person. The original mount had a standing posture in which its tail dragged along the ground behind it. You could see that in the pictures I've just popped up there on the right of your screen. Now, the person behind this monumental discovery was a man named Barnum Brown, who was born in 1873 and died just short of his 90th birthday in 1963. Commonly referred to as Mr. Bones, he was named after the circus showman P.T. Barnum Brown. He discovered the first documented remains of Tyrannosaurus in 1902 and another in 1908, both of which cemented his reputation as the greatest fossil hunter of the early 20th century. Since Brown's first discovery, nearly 50 more nearly or somewhat complete T-Rex skeletons, including the famous Sue at the Field Museum in Chicago, well, they've been uncovered, and there have been a number of partial skeletons revealed as well. So today we have about 50 partial and somewhat complete versions. Sue at the Field Museum is the most complete that we know of, and that's only 75% of the bones. The one in New York at the Museum of Natural History is a little shy of 50%. Now, earlier members of the Tyrannosaur family have been found in Asia, but the most complete skeletons are all from the Western United States. Like other theropods, T-Rex did have feathers, probably of the stage 1, 2, or 3 variety. And we know this today from fossil digs. As this illustration suggests, the stage 3 feathers may have formed a crest on the head of the animal, perhaps brightly colored. Or the feathers may have been primarily on the body. Regardless, imagine that beast hunting you down. Now, some other details about T-Rex that are also eye-popping. It had a bite force of over 6.5 tons, as opposed to a human's 150 pounds. Enough to pulverize the bones of its prey in a single snap. And indeed, when they have uncovered T-Rex bones, they've been able to see pulverized bones in the area where the stomach was. Not whole bones, but just pulverized bones. Incredible. Further, a T-Rex could lift a 5-ton animal with its jaws quite easily. And watch out, T-Rex could run as fast as 25 miles an hour, although most of the time scientists think it moved like a marathon walker to conserve energy while on a hunt. Like its other theropod relatives, it had honeycomb bones, a wishbone, probably brooded on its nest of eggs, and most interestingly, current research indicates that it was probably warm-blooded. Chemical residues in the fossilized bones can help determine that. Further, chemical traces in the fossils can also help us discover the color of those feathers. Using modern birds as an indicator and working backwards in time, it's quite possible that all male theropods, like T-Rex, may have been quite colorful. Well, as we like to say, stay tuned. Now, let's move over to another major branch of the dinosaur family, the Ornithischian dinosaurs. Now, we have no living relatives of this group. As you can see on the cladogram, there are 3 major branches with fabulously tongue-twisty names. The Thyreophorians that had dermal bones armor like Stegosaurus, the ornithopods, which included the duck-billed dinosaurs, and the marginocephalians like Triceratops. Well, let's visit a few of these plant-eating marvels, because that's what all of these are, plant-eating. There you go. And those are the 3 groups. The Thyreophoria, the Ornithopoda, and the Marginophilia. Well, I love Ankylosaurus. What a remarkable beast it is. Ankylosaur fossils have been found in geological formations dating to the very end of the Cretaceous period, about 68 to 66 million years ago, and in Western North America, making it among the last of the non-avian, the non-flying dinosaurs. It was first discovered in 1908 in Montana and named by, guess who? Barnum Brown in that same year. Ankylosaurs were plant eaters, and unlike so many other dinosaurs, didn't seem to possess feathers, though that detail might change in future years. Because scientists are now discovering that fresh out of the egg, almost all dinosaurs probably had some kind of fuzz. Most dinosaurs kept it, Some dinosaurs, perhaps like Ankylosaurus, lost it. Well, anyway, Ankylosaur is estimated to have been between 20 and 25 feet long and to have weighed around 6 to 7 tons. It was quadrupedal with a broad, robust body. It had a wide, low skull and four horns that pointed backwards. It was covered in bony armor plates, also called osteoderms, with bony half rings covering the neck, and had as its most distinctive feature a very large club at the end of its tail. You would not want to be at the receiving end of that thing. Now, ankylosaurs lived alongside dinosaurs like Triceratops and Edmontosaurs, but also tyrannosaurs. So I'm assuming that club came in handy against big predators like T-Rex. Another great and familiar thyrophorian was Stegosaurus, which lived towards the end of the Triassic period, about 155 to 145 million years ago. Stegosaurus skeleton remains were first identified during the Bone Wars by O.C. Marsh in 1887 in Colorado. They were large, heavily built, plant-eating quadrupeds with rounded backs, short forelimbs, long hind limbs, and tails that were held high in the air. Their unique blend of two rows of broad, upright plates along their spine and a tail tipped with spikes makes the Stegosaurus one of the most easily recognized of all dinosaurs. Uh, it's generally agreed that those spiked tails were used for defense against predators. Their spinal plates may have been used for display as well, or for body heat functions. Stegosaurus had a short neck and a small head, meaning it mostly ate low-lying bushes and shrubs. But they were big. One species of Stegosaurus measured over 25 feet long and probably weighed nearly 6 tons. Now, while there's some evidence that Stegosaurus may have had quill-like structures, which are similar to feathers, it's unlikely that it was completely covered in quills or feathers. And the myth that Stegosaurus had two brains, an idea that started in the late 1800s, is, well, just that. It's a myth. It's false. Yes, it had a small brain. And yes, it had a nodule of nerves near its tail. But that nodule was not a brain. Sorry, folks, dinosaurs did not have butt brains. Now, on a personal note, paleontologists from the Museum of Natural History helped to uncover Apex, the nickname given to the largest and most complete Stegosaurus skeleton ever found. Appropriately, it was found near the town of Dinosaur, Colorado. I was there with my husband, Michael, in early December of 2024 on the day the skeleton was unveiled at the museum, and it was a photo op for everybody, including Apex. Now, the second large segment of Ornithischian dinosaurs are the ornithopods, and one of the first dinosaurs ever found in modern times was a member of that group. It was called Iguanodon, a plant-eating animal that had its heyday in the early Cretaceous period, around 125 million years ago. In 1825, the English surgeon, geologist, and amateur paleontologist Dr. Gideon Mantell described several prehistoric teeth that had been discovered in the East Sussex region of England. Now, because those teeth looked like those of an iguana, although much, much larger, Dr. Mantell named his discovery Iguanodon. Now, the background photo on your screen is how the creature probably looked. although it too may have had fuzzy stage 1 or 2 quills or feathers. Now, the drawing that I have just put up on your screen is from 1859, and it clearly shows how little early scientists knew about dinosaur anatomy. Iguanodon was a large herbivore measuring up to 36 feet in length, and it weighed over 5 tons. One of its most distinctive features was a large prehensile thumb used to forage food. In other words, it could grasp things, just like we can, with its powerful hands. So you and Iguanodon have something in common. Now, another ornithopod was Edmontosaurus, which lived during the late Cretaceous period, approximately 70 to 66 million years ago. It was a classic member of the duck-billed dinosaur family. Edmontosaurus was herbivorous and used its flat, hard build to dig up plants. It could move on 2 legs while running away from predators, but it usually walked on all fours. It grew to nearly 40 feet in length and weighed close to 7 tons. Now, one of its claims to fame happened in 1908 when the paleontologist Charles Sternberg discovered a specimen in the western United States and Canada. This is where they really are found, Western Canada, hence its name, Edmontosaurus, right, Edmonton. And he discovered a specimen with fossilized skin attached. Now, this so-called mummy is now on display at the American Museum of Natural History. When it was found, it was assumed that what we saw was an imprint of the original skin. But in recent years, some have suggested that what we see is actual fossilized skin. In other words, we're looking at fossilized living tissue, something that for a while was never thought possible. But most scientists think, yeah, that's what we're looking at. But as we like to say, stay tuned. Now, another ornithopod is this beauty with the tongue-twisting name, Parasaurolophus. I have to say that slowly. This 8,000-pound plant-eating animal lived around 75 million years ago and is probably best known for its remarkable skull. Scientists still debate about its breathing mechanism. Was the long nasal cavity behind its head for creating mating calls, or was it for trumpeting when an enemy approached? We simply don't know. But it's surely proof that dinosaurs came in all shapes and sizes, with often bizarre anatomical features. By the way, note that some scientists think that it might have had quill-like feathers along its spine, as the illustration on your screen shows. Our final group of Ornithischian dinosaurs are the marginocephalians, like Triceratops. The common feature among all the animals in this group is the large margin, okay, hence the name, that surrounds its head. Triceratops was a slow-moving herbivore that used its beak-like jaw and slicing teeth to pluck and chew tough plants that other dinosaurs couldn't eat. It roamed in what's now Western North America during the Cretaceous period, about 69 million years ago. Now, you'll note that its head crest is pretty simple, right? It's just that beautiful crest, right? It's the beautiful margin around the head, around actually protecting the neck. But that is completely unlike Styracosaurus, which boasted an elaborate series of horns on its head crest. What a strange and wonderful dinosaur this was. This 18-foot-long, 3-ton animal was a herbivore and definitely knew how to fend off predators like T-Rex. He may have eaten leaves, but one upward thrust of its horns into the flesh of its attacker I think would leave a very lasting memory. By the way, at this point, I just for a moment like to shift gears and talk just a little bit about dinosaur teeth. Every animal we've looked at so far had to eat, obviously. And the scientific study of teeth allows paleontologists to discover a great deal about the habits of these ancient creatures. Generally speaking, there are four types of dinosaur teeth. The great plant-eating sauropods, like Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus, had peg-like teeth that they used to strip vegetation from bushes and trees. The carnivorous theropods, like Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus, had razor-like teeth, almost like steak knives that ripped open their prey. Duck-billed dinosaurs like Edmontosaurus had up to 1,400 teeth that migrated across the chewing surface, with sharp, enamel-edged front teeth moving sideways to become grinding teeth. As one set wore down, another set replaced them. So it was a lifelong conveyor belt of teeth. And then Triceratops had a beak-like mouth and powerful jaws lined with rows of up to 800 sharp teeth to shred and grind low-lying vegetation, enabling them to slice through dense vegetation that would have been very difficult for other herbivores to consume. The bottom line, for the vast majority of dinosaurs, eating was a full-time occupation, and teeth were important. By the way, why a full-time occupation? Well, because many of them were absolutely gigantic and needed a constant supply of food to provide the proper amount of calories to keep their bodies going. Well, shifting again, we come to the end of the age of dinosaurs, the so-called age of dinosaurs. These often majestic and awe-inspiring creatures began as the result of an extinction event, sometimes called the Permian extinction. The 160 million year reign of dinosaurs ended with one as well. And scientists refer to the major extinction that wiped out non-avian, non-flying dinosaurs as the KT extinction, because it happened at the end of the Cretaceous period and the beginning of the Tertiary period, which is the first period of the Cenozoic era, the era we now live in. That began our life, right? So you have to ask, if it's Cretaceous, why not the CT extinction? Well, geologists use K as a shorthand for Cretaceous. C is shorthand for an earlier period, the Cambrian. So to avoid the confusion, scientists use K. K for Cretaceous, C for Cambrian. Well, probably the biggest culprit for the KT extinction was a comet or an asteroid that was approximately 6 miles across. It landed in water near what is today the Yucatan in Mexico. The initial impact wiped out all life within a few thousand miles, within minutes. According to Earth.com, while the cataclysm, I should say, caused by the asteroid impact extinguished many life forms almost instantly, the impact also caused environmental changes, leading to mass extinctions that played out over a longer period of time. One such extinction trigger might have been the dense cloud of ash and other particles that spread all over the planet after the asteroid impact, which enveloped many parts of Earth in darkness for up to 2 years. During that time, photosynthesis had probably failed, leading to massive environmental collapse, with at least 75% of life on Earth completely extinguished. And it took tens of thousands of years for Earth to fully recover. Remember, the Earth looked different 66 million years ago. North and South America were not even connected, and there were dozens of large islands in between. You can see today's coastline presented by a broken black line on your screen. So the actual impact, you could see the big Chicxulub bullseye there, was actually a water entry. Two other asteroid hits, by the way, within less than 1 million years added insult to injury. One occurred in what is now the Ukraine, and another impact around the same time as the Ukraine happened in the ocean off Western India, which at the time was a massive island heading for a collision with Asia, which leads to the formation of the Himalayan mountains. Further, there was intense volcanic activity on what is now Western India that also affected the planet. So indeed, it's possible that all of these events helped to create the overall KT extinction. This would be an approximate aerial view to thousands of years after the event. Today, these maps show what Chicxulub looks like. The crater is partially submerged and partly uplifted onto the dry land of the Yucatan Peninsula. And we can actually see evidence of the asteroid strikes around the world. A solid dusting of iridium, an element that is found in asteroids but is rare on Earth, covered our planet approximately 66 million years ago. There's a clear line visible around the planet with non-avian dinosaur fossils below the line, but none above. Everything above represents life that evolved after the great impacts. So the 25% that lived, so they evolved from that, including a great explosion of mammal life. And you know there's always a but. Although the KT extinction wiped out 75, some scientists think up to 80% of all terrestrial and marine life on the planet, there was enough life left to give rise to modern plants and animals. That 20 to 25% that remain also included a few hearty specimens of dinosaurs from the theropod lineage. And that lineage is still with us today. Birds, which according to the National Geographic number between 50 and 430 billion individual birds. Now, this range is so broad due to various uncertainties, among them the difficulty of counting billions of small animals that can fly, and the wide and often unclear ranges over which birds roam, and a general lack of scientific data in many areas of the world. But the number is definitely in the billions, with a B. That's a whole lot of dinosaurs. Birds evolved from the bipedal theropod dinosaurs, meaning that T-Rex and the raptor dinosaurs like Velociraptor are all distant cousins. And what that means is that birds, like all dinosaurs, are reptiles. Now think about that for a bit. If dinosaurs are reptiles and birds evolved from dinosaurs, then birds are reptiles too. One of the earliest known birds preserved in fossil remains is the 150 million year old Archaeopteryx. But birds, both those that flew and those that were flightless, had probably evolved as early as 165 million years ago, and had a range of birds with more advanced features appeared soon after Archaeopteryx, like Pelagornis, a seabird with a 20-foot wingspan that lived about 20 million years ago. So you had the dinosaurs, You had the flying reptiles called the pterosaurs, but they were not dinosaurs because they didn't have that hole in the hip socket. And then you had the first birds, which do have the hole in the hip socket. And they were originally part of the theropod family with creatures like T-Rex and Velociraptor. Now, those early birds after the KT extinction, and even those before, well, some were flightless, and some came in all shapes and sizes. One that comes after the KT extinction, that actually it's quite recent, that I find fun, is the 3-foot high Ornithomegalonyx, a giant owl that lived in Cuba about 11,000 years ago. And from their beginnings, in both the age of dinosaurs, quote unquote, age of dinosaurs, before the KT extinction and after the KT extinction, from their beginnings, they were and are colorful, like this cassowary, a species that's been around for over 5 million years in the South Pacific. So, we live in a world of birds. There are at least 10,000 different verifiable species, numbering in the billions. So many scientists argue that we are still living in the age of dinosaurs. From the world's largest bird, the flightless ostrich that weighs over 280 pounds, stands up to 9 feet tall, has a wingspan of up to 7 feet, and is capable of running up to 43 miles per hour, to the smallest bird in the world, the bee hummingbird, which measures less than 2 inches in length, weighs less than a US dime, lives only in the region around Cuba, and beats its wings at an astonishing 80 times per second. The descendants of theropod dinosaurs are alive and thriving. So the next time you see an eagle soar, or watch a swan floating on a lake, you are witnessing a living theropod dinosaur. And yes, tonight at your chicken dinner, you and your family are definitely eating, yep, a dinosaur. Not too far down the family tree from its theropod cousin, Caudipteryx. Hmm. Well, speaking of food for thought, I hope that you enjoyed today's program. For much more information, check out my website, makingwings.net, and explore Deeper Dive number 48. And now, before we talk about our next program, it's time for your thoughts and ideas. Thanks for being here today.